Hi, my name is Elliot, and this is my first-person puzzler, Polarized. The player starts in a cryopod in a large, barren room without windows. The first thing the player sees is a tool rising from a hatch in the floor. This is the Polarity Claw, built to handle magnetic objects. In this first room, the player learns how to activate weighted buttons and pick up objects. The button is deliberately placed closer to the player, prompting them to interact with it before interacting with the cube. A yellow wire is used to inform the player of what components are connected and if they're active. The second room is partially obscured from the player view. This is to first show the problem before revealing the rest of the room. A triggered event sends a magnetic cube flying up right before the player's eyes, showing them how the magnets interact. The first version of this room was more open, with the magnetic interaction happening right as the player entered it. This led to some players looking around the room, missing the important event. The third room has an eradication field in the middle. Having walked through 2 eradication fields located in the doors already, the players should know they are able to pass it. However, the cube cannot. On the other side, the player can see their first generator plate. If they try to put the magnetically charged cube on the button to open the door, it will be attracted to the plate, thus opening the field, allowing the player to put the non-charged cube on the button. The next room is the first real puzzle. The player is shown 2 blue cubes and 1 door with 2 red generator plates. Only having direct access to the 1 cube, I want the player to try to solve the puzzle one step at a time. Thus, first try to activate 1 button before realizing that they have no way of getting the other cube down. Realizing that the only tool to get the stuck cube down is the other cube, the player has to switch the order of solving the puzzle and bring the blue cube to the other side of the glass. The reason this puzzle works so well is that the easily accessible cube is spawned down in the main chamber, and that the player has to think outside the box by bringing the cube out of the main chamber. Had I placed the cube spawner right as the player entered the puzzle room, they would have instantly solved how to get the cube down. Having seen nothing but white walls up until now, the player is funneled in a dark, claustrophobic tunnel before hard revealing the outside world. By keeping the outside world a secret until suddenly revealing it, it creates a huge juxtaposition and a memorable moment. The player gets presented with a long-term goal being the rocket, a mid-term goal being the moving parts above them as well as the pathway leading over to the other rig, and lastly, a short-term goal being the puzzle before them. This puzzle also has a red herring. Trying to solve the puzzle one step at a time, playtesters put the cube on the bottom to get themselves over the gap, until realizing that they need to solve the puzzle from the other way around, by first sending the cube over, then they could get across as well. The player then gets to walk underneath the bridge before heading back inside the facility. To present the entirety of this puzzle, I place the entrance high up, giving the player time to analyze it. The theme of this puzzle is attraction. First, the player has to get the blue cube down by using the red cube, unlocking the way up. The button upstairs is hooked up to 2 doors, 1 wire going through a NOT gate. This means that the player has to deactivate the buttons from the other side of the glass. The solution is attracting the cube away from the button using the other cube. The player is now introduced to the polarity field. With 2 oppositely charged magnets, the generator plate is unable to be activated. The player has to walk with the cube through the polarity field, revealing its ability to switch polarities. The next puzzle is yet another polarity field puzzle. This time the player has to figure out how to get the cube through the polarity field with the right polarity to activate the red generator plate. Realizing that the only way is to get the cube over the field, the player has to launch the cube using the power of repulsion between the cube and the generator plate. The player is once again funneled before revealing the polarity charge. This charge gives the polarity claw the ability to attract and repel magnetic objects. The player is introduced to the attraction ability with a puzzle revolving around attraction. To make this puzzle function, I had to work a lot with signposting and visibility. The idea of this puzzle is for the player to realize that they need to stand on top of the elevator before ascending to reach the beam in the ceiling. I used yellow cloth and lights to guide the player. To make the space above the elevator more noticeable, I created a see-through grating material placed on top of the elevator. I also used this material on the little cube platform to make it easier to see the button below. Moving out to the side of the building, the player can look down at where they were before. The player is now introduced to the ability to attract themselves to magnetic plates, as well as the ability to repel and launch themselves from them. The player then gets to move the crane and use the same steps once more to get on top of the glass control room. The player can now jump on and use the moving platforms to get across to the other side. There they get a view into the fan room, foreshadowing a future puzzle. The player then gets another foreshadowing, seeing the other side of the door out of the fan room. Now the player gets introduced to the ability to pick up and repel cubes with the same polarity. Balancing high up on top of the conveyor line, the player can launch the cube and deactivate the fan. This is where the player learns that polarity fields also affect the polarity claw. Using this, the player can launch the blue cube on top of the glass. And then attract it from the other side. In this room, the player is introduced to the deactivated drone and how it can be used. Drones are dipole magnets, meaning that they can be both attracted and repelled. This is also a foreshadowing that active drones will be encountered later. The player now gets to walk across the bridge, reaching their midterm goal from before. They also get a good look at the rocket, as well as a foreshadowing of the final puzzle. This next puzzle is a twist of the first attraction puzzle between two cubes. I designed it with a particular solution in mind. The solution would be to drag the cube on the outside of the glass using another cube. To get to this solution, I created two platforms separated by eradication fields, linked by a glass walkway. To solve the puzzle, the player needs to position a cube inside the walkway. Repel the other cube from the platform to stick it to the glass. Drag the cubes across and attract the outside cube from the other side. The red cube can now be used to deactivate the eradication fields so that the other cube can be launched across. I used a lot of signposting and yellow paint in this puzzle to make the solution clearer. In this puzzle, I wanted not only the cube to be launched over the polarity field, but also the player. The idea is that the player will bring out the cube and try to launch it over the puzzle, just to realize that they need to switch the charge of the polarity claw before solving the puzzle. This puzzle room was originally much tighter and didn't have the eradication field up top. The problem was that playtesters would ignore the intended solution and perform a skill-demanding launch, attracting the cube mid-air and getting it over that way. This broke my rule that puzzles shouldn't have to require players to be mechanically skilled to solve them, and that's why I put in the eradication field. The player then enters an elevator shaft with a platforming puzzle. I wanted the player to have to switch their polarity halfway up and use the magnetic plate they just attracted themselves to as a launch pad to reach the top. I used symmetry to frame the rocket in the background. The player is then introduced to the now very active drone that sees the player as an intruder. Because the player's polarity claw has the same polarity as the drone, it can't be grabbed from a distance. The player has to use the magnetic cube to catch it. The drone is programmed to stay away from magnetic fields, therefore the player needs to lure it closer, then grab the cube to catch the drone. I wanted to introduce the active drone before the final puzzle, so the player didn't have to learn that mechanic whilst trying to solve the hardest puzzle in the game. The final puzzle is where the player needs to show mastery of every mechanic they learned so far. The general idea is that the player has to activate one button and one generator plate. The drone can't be used for the button because it just flies away. The player must therefore replace the cube with the drone. To do this, the player must use the drone to acquire the cube by launching the drone to the generator pad connected to the eradication fields. And then launching yourself over to the platform. And then switch the polarity of both the drone and the cube. What I really love about this puzzle is that every component needs to be used in multiple ways. The red cube needs to be used to deactivate the eradication fields surrounding the polarity field. Then when the drone is brought through, becoming positively charged, the drone can now be used to deactivate the eradication fields, so that the player can bring through the cube. Now the drone is positively charged and the cube is negatively charged, meaning that they can switch places. Originally, this puzzle was way more complex, which you can read more about in my problems and solutions section. If you still want to learn more, don't be afraid to contact me, because I really love talking about this stuff. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!